Hi, this is me, Ellie, and I'm interviewing my grandmother, Cece Radcliffe, or Carole Radcliffe, and I'm just going to interview her about the Jim Crow South. And I wanted to start off with what's your background? Like, where were you born?
Well, my background was that my father was a career naval officer, and I was born in January of 1941 in Norfolk, Virginia. And as a child, my father was usually transferred every year and a half. So we lived on the East Coast and then the West Coast in California, and then we lived back on the East Coast, and then we moved to Panama, and we lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and that was my first experience with the South. My father was a first-generation American from Santa Cruz, California, and he had an appointment to the Naval Academy and graduated from the Naval Academy in 1927. And so he didn't know very much about anything about integration or segregation. He just thought everybody was equal. And my mother, however, was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and she was much more exposed to segregation through the years. She was born in 1907, and so she would let us know a few things off and on, and there were a few prejudices in our family because of that. But I moved to Charleston when I was about 9 years old, and was here, I was about 7 years old, and I left when I was about 10, and I came back when I was 14 years old, and I went to a private girls' school at Ashley Hall, and I graduated in 1958, and then went to the College of Charleston. And so I basically have been in the South since I've been around 7 years old, and then, basically since I've been about 14 and about 2 other years earlier than that, and I've never left. So that is my background.
So the first question is, how did whites treat blacks back when you were growing up in the South?
Most whites in the South were prejudiced about blacks. They really were. Everything was separate but equal, but it really wasn't equal. Everything, it seemed like, that the blacks had were just not as good as what most of the whites had. And people who had help, and they would always be very kind, and they loved their help and the black people that they had. But they still didn't invite them over to dinner or do anything socially with them, but they loved them very much.
Did you see any black people being bullied by white people?
Not really, I didn't, because I was not exposed to that, because I was in a social strata where I was really not around black people unless I saw them, maybe on the street fighting when I was in a car riding somewhere. But I do remember when we had a hospital riot, kind of, because they didn't think they were being paid equally to the whites at the medical university. And I do remember that as a young woman.
Did you have any black maids?
Yes, we did. And we basically, most of our black maids we loved. And we had one by the name of Geneva that we had for probably 25 years. She was like a member of our family. Yet, we did not have her to a dinner party. If we had a dinner party, she was the servant for the dinner party. But she was treated very, very well. And it's just now even some people have dinner parties, and maybe they don't have black help now, they have white help. So there are always people that do that job of serving other people. in a position like that. However, when I was growing up, it was basically black. We did one time, though, have a white live-in maid.
What was school segregation like?
You know, I don't know much about it because I never went to a public school. Well, I take that back. I went to public school 1 year in my life, and that was in 6th grade in Seattle, Washington. My father was stationed out there with the Navy, and we lived in a gated community and on a golf course, and we had a public school right adjacent to the golf course, and it was very small, and basically the children that went there were from that community and maybe a few others, but I don't remember. There might have been 1 or 2 black children in there, but I did not really know them. There weren't any in my class.
Linking to that question, were they bullied at school because they were that race?
I never remember them being bullied at school.
Did you have respect for African Americans?
I had a lot of respect for African Americans, the ones that worked for us. Now, there were some that I did not have a lot of respect for because it seemed like they just didn't always have the character that they should, like always coming to work on time, or maybe taking something that might not be theirs that they would call borrowing. But sometimes we loved ours, and we would give our help another chance if they didn't do well. But then after that, we would hire somebody else if they didn't. So, but they just lived differently than we did.
Do you recall any major civil rights protests when you were
I do remember
younger?
the hospital strike, which I was talking about earlier, and that's when all the black help went on strike, saying they were not paid enough. They were not paid equally to their white counterparts. And I believe after that, they were paid just like the white people, and they should have been.
Did you have any African American friends as a kid?
No, I didn't.
Did you have a special bathroom for any black maids that you had?
Yes, we did. My mother and father built a house, and in the house was a maid's bath. And the maid would come in the morning around 7:30 and change her clothes in the bath, and that was her bathroom during the day to wash her hands and toilet, and that was her bathroom. And she was expected not to go in any other bathrooms. And we also had a gardener, but we did not have a bathroom for him outside. Now, a lot of the houses in Charleston had a separate bathroom outside for the gardener also, but we did not. And my father used to always fix the gardener lunch, and he always liked to have beanie weenies, and we would put it on. My father would put it on a paper plate with the plastic fork and give it to the gardener, and he would eat it, and he loved it. And my father loved him, but that's just the way it was. He would not come in and eat. Even if we had invited him in to eat, even in our kitchen, he would not have come in. He would have said, "No, sir."
Did you see any blacks sit on the back of buses?
Oh, yes, I did. That's where they always sat. Not anymore, but they did up until probably, I'd say, the 70s. They did. They would always sit in the back of the bus.
Did you have a black nanny as a child?
We did. We did. And I did when I raised your father and his sisters. We had a wonderful black nanny. We called her Nanny. And her name was Rosalie. And she was almost like their grandmother. And she loved them, and I let her discipline them. She could switch them when they were naughty, and she could fuss at them and tell them exactly what she thought and how they should act. And I totally respected her, And I was so grateful that she was there. And then her granddaughter used to come and give the children a bath at night and feed them supper. And then we'd take her home. We'd all get in the station wagon and we'd take her home and say goodnight to her. And everybody would give her a kiss. They loved her so much. She was their like their grandmother.
What were some places in town that were segregated?
Most restaurants that were in business back then, like Henry's or the Patio or Everett's or Perdita's. I don't think I ever saw a black man, woman, or black couple eat in there. It just didn't happen. When I was growing up in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s.
Were you involved in any civil rights protests?
No, I was not.
Did you think that segregation was unfair?
I think it really was. I don't think it was correct. And I think I think it was hypocritical to say separate but equal, because it really wasn't. But it was so ingrained in the whites and the blacks that the blacks just thought they had to act that way, and the whites, it was just a way of life, and the whites had to act the way they acted. And there was a lot of lovely white people who had wonderful help, but there was a line drawn. They did not come to a cocktail party or a dinner party. They were not considered their social equal. But that had gone on for so long, and when I came to Charleston, it was just an accepted way of life, and that's just how it was.
In the book To Kill a Mockingbird, they had that court case, the Bob Ewell, or the Mayo Ewell and Tom Robinson case. Did you hear about any major court cases like that, like black versus white man court cases?
I don't recall that. I do recall the school district, the school court case in federal court, where the federal court wanted the schools to all be integrated. And I don't think it's still really working out real well. But I don't remember any of those cases. Well, actually, I was on a murder trial, and the two, I was on the jury, and the two people in there, the accused, the defendant, and the prosecutor, both of the people involved, not the prosecutor, but the two people that were involved, the man who shot the man, or said he had shot them, somebody said he had shot the man, and the man that was killed, they were both black. And that didn't mean, it was colorless to me. I just cared whether or not, whether he was guilty or not for the murder. And we decided we couldn't prove beyond a reasonable shadow of a doubt that he had killed the man. He probably did. So we let him go. But we didn't think of it as a color.
If the Confederate Army had won the war, what do you think life for African Americans in the 1900s and now would be like?
I think it would be awful. I think it would be terrible. And I would say that probably a lot of the blacks would want to go back to Africa, because it would not be very acceptable.
Were you mean to any black children when you were a kid?
Well, like I said, I really wasn't around any, but I would have never been mean to a black child growing up. I would have not ever been mean to one.
Back to the book To Kill a Mockingbird, do you think Tom Robinson should have been found guilty or innocent?
And Tom Robinson is
the
accused?
Black man who Mayella Ewell said that he raped her, but in the book it just didn't seem like it.
I would say he was innocent. I think it was for prejudice that he was convicted.
Thank you very much for taking your time to interview me. This was a really great experience, and I can't wait to share your stories to my class.
Thank you, Ellie.